Halo Sadia dan Gugun.
Ini akan setiap sesi di live ya Mbak ya? Atau siapa panitia? Berarti kayak bisa nonton lagi atau bagaimana ya?
Iya.
Oke.
Ternyata udah live streaming Mbak di YouTube. Kita nggak bisa bercanda-bercanda.
Oh iya, berarti kita nggak bisa
lokal
bercanda
lagi.
Ini udah bisa dimulai. Tadi saya diinfo ini panitia. Oke, karena live ya kita mulai dulu aja. Sambil menunggu presenter yang Renanda Yafi dari Gajah Mada University. Good morning everyone. Welcome in the second day or day 2 SEA MNC conference, and I am Reni Triwardani from UPN Veteran Yogyakarta. It's such a great honor for me to be here actually to learn from all presenter and participant in this panel. And today we have 4 panelists are keen to share their exciting research on media, culture, and society. And we will hear from Dr. Zakia Habibie from Universitas Islam Indonesia. And the second is Mr. or Miss, I'm not sure, Renanda Yafi from Gajah Mada University. And then the third is Miss Saskia Nur Anggraini from Indonesia Institute of Art, and the last, Mr. Panji Mukadis from Bunda Mulia University. And I guess everyone excited to hear their presentations today. And during this session, I will be your timekeeper. In terms of structure of panel sessions, each speaker will be have 20 minutes to deliver their presentations. After all 4 panelists have shared their thought, we will have a Q&A session about 45 minutes. And then we will invite all participants to drop questions through a chat box while presentations is occurring. And then I will read the questions for the panelists to respond later. Another option is to ask the panelists directly during Q&A session by giving raised hand. I guess there is a mode raise hand, right? So you can react raise hand, and then you can give the questions later. Okay, without delaying any further, I will invite Dr. Zakia to deliver your presentations. Time is yours.
Thank you, Reni. You can call me just Zaki. Allow me to begin with share my screen for my slide. While waiting, it's my voice. It's clearly enough. There is reception there.
Yes.
Good. Clear. Now, does it come up on your screen?
Yes.
My slide. Good.
Yes, good.
All right. Thank you very much. 15 minutes from now. Well, good morning or good day for everyone. Be slow, witnessing the articulation of connected practices by Creative Collective in Indonesia and Malaysia. Very happy to be part of this panel on media, culture, and society with some of a familiar name and face and work, and also a new person that will be interesting as well. And looking at the spare of the title, it seems like ontologically it's also in between Indonesia and Malaysia mainly, but of course that will be other cases. Before I speak more about the substance of my paper, I think it's good, since it is in a kind of more like a very multi or even interdisciplinary conferences, that would be good to give you a hint about my research background and expertise. I myself is a media studies and visual culture scholar. focusing mainly in the interrelation between everyday life and creativity and cultural practices in cities. My expertise subfield in my research mainly dealing with urban media and communications, and my perspective it began from critical media studies and cultural studies. In terms of my methodological approach, mainly it's qualitative approach, textual analysis, ethnography, and recently it's visual methods, especially the combination between sensory ethnography and the use of visual media. So for this particular talk or the paper that I have submitted to this conference, it's mainly based on this kind of strategic point. So by giving you a hint of my research background and expertise, I hope you can also be aware that that's where I started from. So even though I'm seeing like the Southeast Asian contemporary Southeast Asian society, but that's the angle when I'm looking at my theoretical standpoint for this particular paper. It's based especially part of my latest book, Creative Voice of the City, the one under in the middle, and this is based on a 5-year of my doctoral research that's finished in 2020. And then beyond that, theoretically speaking, it is also for this particular paper, I mainly relied on the understanding of articulation, especially by Stuart Hall. The way that everything in the cultural aspect, it's supposed to be connected, and the way we can understand what is actually the meaning of the way people create meaning, as well as the meaning itself or the culture itself with the big C is actually part of this articulation. Apart from there, I'm also informed mainly by practice theory, in particular the perspective of Mark Hobart, an anthropologist that see the media related practice rather than the media oriented practice. So even though it's talk about media, it's not always foreground media as a foreground, but it's always like connected with other aspects. From there, I developed my understanding on the theoretical perspective of the so-called non-media centric media studies. For those who come from media research or communication or even the cultural study itself, it's quite unique because we still talk about media, but we put the media as important as others, so it's not always in the middle. So maybe it's not unique for those who coming from the background from specifically area studies, for example, because media is only one of institution or one of the practice. But for me, coming from the media studies, the non-media centric media theories is kind of like relatively contemporary, and it's still an ongoing theoretical area. And lastly, in terms of the theoretical position, it's also the way I understand space and the city, especially looking at the spatial practice from I developed from the Henri Lefebvre understanding of the production of social space. Well, that's just the theoretical context and my background. Let's come to the more empirical aspect of this paper, the creative collective. The term itself, it's not me who created it. It's mainly been used, especially in any art and creative aspect. But recently, due to the global discourse of creative city, creative space, creative hub, and then any kind of a group or a community that create a kind of a collective-based activity become prominent and even become ubiquitous in any kind of urban environment. But to me, the term creative collective has a conceptual foreground in especially based on the aspect of the alternative and independent. So that's what I mean by this creative collective. It's not as wide as community. It's not as wide as, or it's not narrow as just simply creative corner or creative hub, but it has a bond within it. It has a bottom-up process. That's why I think the longer conceptual term should be the alternative and independent creative collective. So I simplify that with the creative collective. Who are there? In Georgetown, Malaysia, all the studied collective in Georgetown is actually reside in one compound called Hin Bus Depot. The old building itself, it used to be a bus depot in the 1970s, but this former old bus depot area has housed recently since 2014 has housed several creative collective in the city, and each collective become a tenant and pays a rent to the compound owner. But the owner itself, a family, they don't really involved in the management of the building, the compound, the management of event. It's really freely and has a freedom for each of the collective. Each creative collective run their own activity and while regularly contributing to collaborative project among themselves as well as with the collective outside of this compound. And then for the focus of this talk, I lie the focus on the practices and experiences of individual in 4 creative collective, Poco Things, who run a wooden craft workshop, and then Graphic District Solution, who create an open forum for young graphic designer and illustrator, and Wish Concept that manage a handmade craft studio and accessory stores, as well as Hinbas Depot, the name of the management itself, not the place, who usually organize a pop independent market, art exhibition, and social gathering for the creative collective. And then in Bandung, in other city, this one is in Indonesia, the studied creative collective are not located in one place. There are 4 collective. The different with the Georgetown case, in Georgetown, all 4 collective reside in one place, physical place. But this one, they have their own space. Tobuchil and Club, now recently they rebrand themselves as Tobuchil, is a craft collective. And then Kineruku, an alternative library, cafe, open space, and recently also a vintage shop. Omnium, it used to be a bookshop, and then focusing more on the support system for independent music scene in Bandung as well as in Indonesia. And lastly, it's Omnispace, an art collective. So all this creative collective, the way I chose it, of course, there are consideration, everything. So rather than talk about the macro study, I prefer to see the micro aspect of the context and the term, and also looking at the more on the street level and the everyday life analysis. But let me give you the context of it. Yesterday, when I listened to the first day of some of the keynote session, talk about a critical point of view of so-called methodological nation, something like that, or national methodology. So in my work, I basically also follow that a perspective. I don't see nation as a kind of a border. This case itself, it's not comparative per se. It's more about I'm looking at the practice. So when you talk about the practice, you don't really pay attention much in the structure, the social structure and anything. So nation become less important. But cities still play a significant kind of a significant role in the way I put the creative collective in the context. But I don't study the policy, I don't study the urban planning or anything. I study more about the city dweller, the way people deal with their everydayness and also deal with the tension within the city. Just to give you a hint of the context of the city and the key concept, mainly it is actually due to the creative city discourse clearly, as well as the so-called global forming creative city and so on, or index of creative city. So that also happened in both city as well as in any other city, including in their own network, like in Cebu in the Philippines and also in Chiang Mai in Thailand. And more city try to follow this kind of formula, especially based on the experience economy, one of the major social and economical force in recent years. So in such a context of the city, such a context of a global discourse, such a context of a global formula, I myself focusing on the position, looking up from the point of view, the point of view of the people who live within the city, who have been doing creativity way before the formal branding, the formal city branding, or the global recognition as UNESCO Creative City, as UNESCO World Heritage Site, and so on and so on. How actually the people see themselves living in such a tension, how the people actually do and involve, and what actually they do with the media. So that kind of my general question as a starting point. And then from there, So this is unique, especially for this session or in the conference. I designed my paper focusing on two aspects simultaneously. One, it's about, of course, it's about the analytical elaboration of some of the key findings. But secondly, I'm also looking at the possibility to discuss further in terms of the methodological reflection. So in this paper, basically, I tried to incorporate all these two into the combination of how actually I reflect the way I use this kind of method, especially the use of the sensory ethnography or ethnography itself as a holistic contextualization, and the use of one of the visual method that I call photo documentation. So I walk through the city, I walk with the people I study, I talk to them, I interview them like an ethnography in general, but I also took pictures about the city, about the street, about the collective, about the physical place, and about their everyday practice. So I used the camera intentionally in an unobtrusive way to understand their everyday practice. Yes, indeed, I am still the one in terms of the subjective position. I'm still the one who pressed the release button. It's not photo elicitation. We can discuss that later on, maybe in the Q&A session if we have time. So I'm mainly still the subjective position who shot the frame. And even though during that process, I also talked to the people, showed to the pictures to them and discussed them, and then took again. And then from there, for this particular paper, there are three main analytical themes that also become an arena for methodological reflection. And one of them, I call it social settings in media-related practice. For example, as in this one photo collage. Oh, speaking about photo collage, I also use the form of photo collage as one of the analytical form to present my material as well as my argument. So most of the visual imagery, especially either from the digital media screenshot as well as from my own photograph, it's always been presented in this kind of photo collage rather than individual image or photograph. The reason behind it is because that's also the experience of the social experience when I took the pictures as well. So coming back to the first theme, social settings in media related practice. And in one of the occasion when I simply interview one of the key person in one of the collective in Bandung, it was interrupted by another members of the collective, that he wants the person I interview to come over and discuss about the process of making a regular Instagram post for the official account. And then I stopped the interview. And then, of course, I have to wait. As an ethnographer, we have to understand that kind of a dynamic in the field. But to me, there is an interesting aspect, because when we stop talking, it's actually when the person explained to me that, I quote, "We have a room upstairs for computer and stuff, but most of the time we are here in the downstairs with all our crew during our opening hours. It's easier and quicker for them to get in touch with me if something needs to be discussed or decided," said the person. End of the quote. To me, the making of a single Instagram post, which really maybe just very trivial, very banal, very everyday, somehow reiterated the importance of social settings in the everyday practices of all the studied creative collective, not just in this particular collective. To me, their media-related practices cannot be understood thoroughly without considering the way they engage with and build from the social relation among each other and all aspects in their social setting. At this point, media-related practice, I argue, has become the very site for investigating the so-called assemblage of practices of production, distribution, engagement, and used by different people in different situations. And here, in my case, specifically on the way in which everyday creativity is being done within the collective. And choosing the media platform itself, it's becoming simply more and more pragmatic. But beyond that is actually, there's something organic apart from the pragmatic. yes, indeed, pragmatism is a key here, part of their everyday tactic of subtle resistance. So that's my another point of view, that the way they do it in this kind of a slow process, organic way, it's also part of their subtle resistance to the so-called a discourse that is actually part of their city in terms of creative city, in terms of now it also becomes smart city, and so on and so on. They put energy into people participation more rather than following the discourse itself within their city. As a visual artist, one of the visual artists realized that perhaps his collective might no longer exist or stay the same in the future. But to him, he's more than happy to see their collective ideas and alternative approaches in doing art and organizing art process to be known and continued by other people, like the quote here. And then in the follow-up of the other theme, of course, there are many other empirical example you can explore more in my book. But then other theme is also important to be discussed is about the material objects and the importance of social cohesion used through this material object. Like this one example, the fabric tote bag for the people in this organic creative hub. This one is from Hinbas Depot in Georgetown, Malaysia, has become a material object that represents symbolic meaning of shared values, communal practices, and sometimes a political aspiration. And to me, methodologically, as a field researcher in this place, the use of tote bag here is also a borrowed lingo from a current universal discourse and practice that is combined with their own vernacular expression of social relation, sense of taste, and local issues or aspiration. In the beginning of my field research, I didn't realize how important it is. So the tote bag is just a common tote bag. People use it on an everyday basis. But then I changed my my strategy, my everyday tactic as well as a field researcher. And then I also try to incorporate this lingo into my own physical appearance. And then including the use of my own fabric tote bag. And then I somehow found an easier way to get along with them. Of course, when I was introduced by the key informant in each collective, I experienced more acceptance by other people who regularly work or visit the events here. I kept using my tote bag though. It was practical. It was comfortable, of course. And I felt, this is the most important thing, that my informant were also more comfortable around my presence. I remember that one of the key important aspects in the ethnographic work, especially the use of sensory ethnography like this one, while I also take pictures using photograph technique. The importance of a researcher's appearance, especially in the aspect of presence and distance, playing out between these two aspects is key aspect to make the ethnographic fieldwork quite successful. But of course, I also agree that researchers' appearance per se, it's not the most significant factor, but it's a key role. Even though managing our own appearance sounds like a trivial thing, I experienced that a good understanding of our informant everyday practices and their social environment can benefit us with relevant cues and deeper insight through the follow-up interview and the story and everything. I found out this kind of material object beyond the tote bag. It's also happened in other collective. In Bandung, they use the vintage suitcase, and how this material object become a sensitive, affective object within the studied group. Understanding this material object and how it is important being for the people I study is also a significant aspect of gaining access to more individual or their groups and understanding layers of emotion surrounded the everyday practice. And then since I did when I did this the whole research, I was based and affiliated in very far away. I was in Lund in the southern part of Sweden, and then after I did the field work like 1 year, and then coming back, and then in the following year I came back again. So in between that, I was trying to maintain the relationship, the connection with the people I study. And then I just also realized the importance of another material object called the physical postcard. Who use postcard anyway in such a digital environment? The people I study, it's very tech savvy. They are very very embracing the use of a digital media, social media, but they also pay attention, like the tote bag, like the vintage suitcase, the importance of the postcard. So it's at a few occasions I send a postcard to them, mainly using a simple moment like, I understand some of them also Muslim. So during the Eid al-Fitr, the end of the fasting month Ramadan, I send a postcard or a card like to say a greeting. And to a few groups in either in Bandung and Malaysia, they also celebrate lunar New Year's or Chinese New Year's, and then I send the postcard. And then the use of postcard, to me, in the beginning, it just simply to keep connect, because in the following year I will meet them again. But what I didn't realize, some of them also use that as a kind of more, or given another layer of meaning. Some of them also post my postcard in their own platform, and then I reflect to that process. Here, to me, the practice of sending a postcard seems to speak more than simply a tool to maintain the researcher's present and absent, and also participation from a remote distance. I realized that the postcard I send, like this one, is an A4 size postcard depicting a Swedish children books character, Petson and Findus, is a practice to send it to them as basically the same creative lingo they usually use within their own social network. And this step could somehow help me to dig into deeper layers of feeling where my informant also experience. It also reminds me of the importance in studying experience, as one of the, like Sarah Ping said, I quote, about experience is about what it is like for other people to be in the world and how we know and learn about this beyond word, end of quote. So in my own research experience, the way I try to relate to the informant feeling and practice and understanding that practice is by continuously look through different lenses. I use a quote here when I use the lens, because I literally use the lens, the camera lens, but this one is use different lenses of perspective and understanding the significance between the details within the practices and the broader context of such practices. Then I also use the material object. Here is the postcard. My informant have feeling attached to the object. The use of unique postcard, for instance, it's also trying to connect with the people I have become part of the field research, and so on and so on. So I think all these two themes, it's lead to another layer of my argument and my understanding. The way I understand their everyday practice, their feeling, is actually part of what I argue as the subtle resistance through a labor of love. They do a resistance, even though without an offered protest, without going to the street, their resistance is done in a subtle way, organic way, slow way, using their understanding of labor of love. The Creative Collective never closed their physical store, library, studio, or gallery outside their regular closing time. But they also sometimes create a distance. Even for them, doing creativity in everyday life, it's beyond the discourse. They are not the creative industry kind of style, doing everything in a massive way, in high speed, and so on. So sometimes they also close in a very unique way. One of the collective decided to close their activity on Tuesday. And the reason it's, I quote, people from other cities usually come here when they don't need to go to work. So we are open during the weekend. But we had to have one day off from everything. Since most places like museum or gallery are usually closed on Monday, so we keep open on Monday. If we close on the day, people would have more limited places to go there. So we chose to close every Tuesday, simply like that. Apparently, he continued, in Javanese, he himself belonged to a Javanese ethnic group. Tuesday or Selasa in Javanese means selo-seloning menungso, when people have free time. So we shouldn't work either, she said it in smile. But indeed, in the quote, indeed, the way they do and the way they understanding what is work time, what is leisure, what is pleasure is also very organic way, and they have their own position. So taking a break or deciding on a closing day is a means, to me, it's a mean of creating distance, modifying activities to sustain their labor of love approach to work and life. While the form of such everyday tactic vary from one person to another and from one collective to another, the functions remain the same. They try to sustain their creative collective not only in its financial and social aspect, but also the emotional aspect of everyday labor, to which have to be in line with the common values and interests they build together. So when this is just a tiny example to end my talk. So when I met one of the key persons in one of the collective in Georgetown, he explained that working in the wood craft industry, it's not an easy way, especially in this city, because the furniture production, it's mainly expected to be done in a very industrious way, quick way. But one of the designer and the key figure in this collective enjoys his slow process in working with his fellow designer and her manager. For them, this slowness not only deals with the production processes, but also slow process in enjoying the work they have created, either big or small project. As he said, for us, making is easy. The hardest part is how to make others buying the idea we offer. So he realizes it is not an easy task to make other people appreciate his work and the way he and his collective work in different style than the common practice of the traditional woodcraft maker in the city. Those who mostly work in a quick speed using an industrious way, as I said before. Whereas for him, it's okay to be slow. Such an approach happened in the studied creative collective in other collective in this city in Georgetown, as well as in Bandung. So the slow process, the organic way of doing things, crafting, to me, eventually leads not only about the way I rely my argument in building about the understanding of my informants practices, but it also has a critical position that I should reflect to my own research practice. The slow and organic way of doing a research, understanding my own research, understanding our own materials, understanding how we are going to build our argument, it's somehow it's also important to be considered of, especially in nowadays in academia, especially when everything is calculated by metrics, by speed, by numbers, and then we forget what is actually why we do this research in the first place. So to me, this whole experience of research and building the argument, writing it up, and share it to you and others in different forums and different ways, it's also actually being informed by my own informants in terms of the way it's supposed to be done based on the context, based on the main aim. So these are my contact details, including my Instagram account that I am still using it to explore and experimenting in terms of the visual method aspect. And if you are interested in reading of my previous work in relation to this topic and this research, please just click the link or simply scan the QR code here. Thank you very much. I think that will be all from me. Leave the floor back to the moderator. Back to you, Rennie. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mas Zaki. Interesting research. Okay. Thank you, and I welcome the participant who just joined recently, and then I guess the second presenters didn't appear yet. So can we move to the third presenter, Mbak Saskia? Is that okay? Okay. It's okay, Mbak Saskia. Okay. And then before Mbak Saskia start, we still invite participants to drop questions through the chat box during presentation, and then I will read the question for panelists later. Okay. We will continue to Mbak Saskia to present your thought. Time is yours, Mbak. the voice.
I will check the audio.
But sorry, Mbak Saskia, I don't know everyone. I still cannot hear the voice clearly. Perhaps the volume.
Or maybe I can just change the source. Sorry.
Okay.
Test. How about now?
Yeah, clear.
Okay. Sorry, because I'm using the Bluetooth speaker, so then maybe
Delay.
and yeah, I'm sorry because I'm not ready yet actually, but it's okay. All right. So thank you for introducing this session, delivering this session, Ms. Reni. Thank you, Mas Zaki, for the wonderful presentations. It's nice to see your work. I think it's a part of your doctoral thesis, right? And
Yes.
yeah, and then I will share. Wait, this is still.
Take your time. It's okay.
Okay, could you see the?
Yes, clear.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, this present view. Okay. Okay, I think you can still see clearly my presentation, right? Because I changed the view. Okay, I will put the time first. Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody here in this panel. My name is Saskia Nur Anggraini. I'm from Institut Seni Indonesia Yogyakarta, ISI Yogyakarta. And my undergraduate degree is from anthropology, and then I continued my study in televisions, and then I continued my studies in art studies on film. So this one is actually my latest piece, my work or artwork that I'm actually not really not really active anymore in the productions of art, but then I feel the connections with these issues, with this story, and then I decided to make the personal documentary, The Edge of Remembrance. It's made by, it's actually telling my stories and the relations, my stories and my grandfather's stories. And it's about and in this context, because there's a lot of things that I want to tell in this movie, but in this context, I'm more focusing on the identity of Indonesian, Malaysia, minor history. So I put more attention on the relations of Indonesian, Malaysia, and the history, and how my personal reflections into these movies. So that's a kind of a disclaimer, because we can also see we can also talk about the methodology within this film, but then I choose to be more focusing in this presentations and papers into the minor histories. So, okay, this is the background. Like this is, I quoted for my mom, and this is my mom and me. And this is my grandfather's. Like my mom's always said that you just like my dad. It must be fun for him to have such a grandchild like you. I hope she's alive and knowing you. Like my mom always said that, like continuously, and she always said that, oh, you love history, you love the political, you love to seeing people to comment at their ears, how their ethnicities, background, and etc. etc. So I just wondering, since I was child, whose is my grandfather, and how he's look like, and what kind of belief that he's interesting beliefs of him, that my mother always continue remind him when she looks at me. That's the background. So I think about that, how I can know him, because my mom and the mother and father of my mom, like my grandparents, is already died before I was born. And this film actually screened in the last in the first panel. I'm sorry if you guys didn't really know about that, because actually this is the special screening and very limited screening, because the film is still on the distribution process. So I really hope that we can find this film in the festival soon. I really hope. So this is the background. So I started to find who is my grandparents, and because I think and this paper, I will focus on the how personal documentary filmmaking presents individual stories. So this is my individual stories as representations of identity, memory, and providing a variety of discourse and truth. So the discourse and truth, actually we already mentioned before in the last session, in the earlier session, and this is how I can, and the process itself is how I, this is the research question in this paper. I mean, this is how I hopefully this paper can explore how the personal documentary filmmaking as a methodology that I use, presenting my stories, and also how it looks like in the film. This is a research question, and this is the methodology that I use, like practice as a research. And basically, this is a visual ethnography or domestic ethnography research, using the voices and informations and archive from all the family members. So I explore the archive from my grandparents, from the informations and in-depth interview with my mother, with my uncle in Malaysia, and also the archive that I found about my grandparents in the National Library. So I building why it's a practice as a research, because I building an argument from findings and conclude that his story, like my grandparents' story, helped to force a sense of belonging and bridging hybrid articulation of identity. And also I use the film as research. So I beginning the film, the part of the film for questioning who is my grandfather, and wondering why he's died because of the film Penumpasan Pengkhianatan G30 SPKI, a propaganda New Order film, because he died after watching that film by heart attack. And then I'm wondering why he died, why he questionings about that film, and also that I know from the relatives that he wrote the book about Suharto, and he also the writer, a journalist writer in the Sukarno era. So that background bring me to the hypothesis, the hypothesis of the who is he, or what his political identity. And the whole film, I mean the content of the film is actually explore that the findings of what I found, what I've questioning, what I've hypothesis prove. And at the end of the film, it's kind of the reflecting or conclusions about how I see him through the findings. So this is the kind of the things that I use. So I explore from the photographs, from the letters, from the writings, and from the official letters, and also archive from Singapore nationals. And this one is I found this one, in the left one, in the family member archive in 2016, when I started to know him from my relatives when I went to the Malaysia. And then after 2006, I just know that, oh, it's something interesting with him, and also with the history that I never know about Indonesian's movement in Malaysia. And then I digging more and more, and not so many things found. And then I have an opportunity coming back to my relatives in 2019 and found this letter. This letter is written by the Nafiah binti Haji Abdul Rauf, is the mother of my grandfather, that asked for to free my grandfathers from the jail, from the detention center, because he was exiled, right? I mean, in this article said that he was exiled and then jailed, and also in another article we found that he claimed as a communist or leftist party that that we will later on tell you about that. So this film builds the story from scratch by finding newspapers, writing, photographs, postcards, and memory from my grandfathers. And we found something here, that a Free Indonesians organization or Persatuan Indonesia Merdeka, that we found out it's interesting to see how Indonesians diaspora in Malaysia. And this is the screenshot from the film. This is actually the photo album that I found in my cousin's house. It's actually left behind, and then I found like, what is it? I see the Kongres 3 PIM. I think this is the latest Kongres PIM, yeah, at the Kuala Lumpur at that time. This film finds my grandfather political movement then after I found this book, because I see his speech in the front of the people, and then there is like a poster of the Indonesians' belief of the independence, but it helps on Kuala Lumpur. And so we found that I found that the colonializations during the 45 and 49 after the Indonesia's independence, actually there is a lot of movements in Indonesia and in Malaysia that symbolize political expression space that is actually rarely told. Like for me myself, I don't really know about how Indonesians diaspora movement can influence the movement in Malaysia itself to get their independence. And then I found kind of this. This is from Singapore Asia's Yusof Ishak Institute, which is, oh, sorry, my battery is low. Which is actually, see, the PIM here is the federations. Wait, sorry for that. The PIM here is under the Indonesian Office of Singapore and Penang. It was before the aims is to Singapore. Sorry, the aim of the aim the Indonesian Office in Singapore and Penang is actually to open up the trade door, yeah. But then it's interesting here. I found the secret agent in Malaya, remnant of NEI, Netherlands East Indie, and revolutionary group and ex PKI Sumatra. So it's clearly stated that PIM is categorized as a leftist, and also the revolutionary group of NEI and PKI Sumatra. So, and then I've also found the Majalah Persatuan Indonesia Merdeka, that they are published during the 47 until 49, and we translated into this is coming from Bahasa Jawi. And then there is an agreement of the imperialism and capitalism. It's wrote in 1947, and they refuse the ideology of feudalism, and they also said that the kings of Malay is on the imperialism and capitalism's feudalism, and they thinking that the freedom of expression and thinking have to be clearly stated as to the Malay society. So cita-cita persatuan Indonesia for the Indonesians' unity is not about the same of the ethnicity and religion that actually stayed before, that the Malayness and also the Islamic is as a foundation, but it's about the same of the will for the independence. And this is also the statement that people in the Peninsula Malayan to be gathered together. So I found this piece and then thinking, okay, so this is something about him. And the fact that we know the migrations of Indonesians to neighboring Malaysia has a long history back to pre-independence, recorded as early as the 13th and 14th century, and hence the status of Malay language as a lingua franca. So it was before, oh, okay, maybe it's just because we are the one of the Malay ethnicity, and also the Bahasa Indonesia coming from Malay. But then also we found the ideas of serumpun, that serumpun comes from the root of rumput, cluster, clumps, family groups, stock of race, and the idea of the co-identification on the basis of stock of a racial lineage. It was before. The concept of serumpun has been used extensively by nationalist movement in both countries after Second World War to strengthen solidarity to drive for the independence. So the idea, the last idea is like this. But then after the movement, the flourishes of the movement, many Malayan of Indonesian's origin and leftist group influenced by Indonesia were established in the Malay Nationalist Party, which received training from Indonesia to mobilize the Malayan people against the British. And when the Indonesians finally gained independence, Malayan leaders sought aspiration from their older brothers, obliged to help Serumpun achieve independence. So that the ideas of Serumpun is actually the background of the formations of PIM and also the flourish of the national party in Malaysia. Like this, the Kesatuan Melayu Muda, a radical nationalist and anti-British organization, presented the concept of Melayu Raya and as being synonymous with the Indonesia Raya and Greater Indonesia or Greater Indonesia, based on a common history link in continuity to glorious past. Their dream was to various group of Bangsa Melayu in both Dutch colonial territory and the Malay territory, Malaya, that British territory, to merge into a sovereign state of one united bangsa. So this is the aim of Melayu Raya is the same as Indonesia Raya with the aspiration of Malay nationalist movement. This is to revive again the heritage of Sriwijaya, which is the commonly unity of the nation, the bangsa. In 1938, Persatuan Melayu Selangor or Selangor Malay Association was formed in Kuala Lumpur, and this organization proposed to stop all the alien immigrations to then Malaya, but encourage Indonesian immigrant because the Indonesians came from the same ethnic stock as the Malays. So I think that's the background. And also the interlink of the PIM formation. But I try to then conclude my film and my findings into the story of grandfather and I. So through a diasporic subject, the filmmaking itself, experience. So I experienced across history and political movement. I mean, my grandparents' experience across history and political movement affords me a nuanced positions for reflecting on issues of in-between identity. I mean, because me myself as an who didn't know my ancestors said like, okay, Indonesia and Malaysia just have a love-hate relationship, and this minor history that Indonesians diaspora in Malaysia is told but never been blow up, or it's maybe forgotten. So I think, okay, so now this reflection for me that I was living in the in between identity, and the film itself adopt the concept of identity as a production, because if you join the last sessions, this production is kind of the endless, ever unfinished conversations that always incomplete process in which our representations of others and our experience are significant. Because then on my film, I cannot even mention the conclusions of what my grandparents' political identity afterward, because it's still question mark, and I really want to fill in the gap. And the production itself, I might say, the endless, ever unfinished conversations. And the issues of migration are in this film artistically addressed by employing an impersonal documentary in which representations of diasporic identity of Indonesian live in Malay. And my grandfather's story as a migrant in Malaysia during Malaya colonial is an interesting political identity. Open up the following research about political identity of Indonesian in Malaya, because just as we know, recently the discourse and migration related to the people in border and always in the context of contemporary and capitalism structure. So this is also the challenge to revisiting the political identity background through this kind of the method of filmmaking. So I will end my presentations here. I'm sorry if it's too over time. Thank you for your opportunity.
Thank you, Mbak Saskia. It's really a good. I think I'm so exciting, to hear your presentations, because it's like how the life story begins, and then becoming the diaspora research or memory studies. It's very nice, very interesting. Thank you, Mbak Saskia. And then perhaps before we have a Q&A, we still have two presenters, but I guess the second is still not here. But so we will move to the last presenter, Mas Panji Mukadis. We will hear your thought, pre-recorded, right? So Mas Panji will be share, or committee will do that?
From the committee.
Oh, okay. Wait. Mbak Miranda. Okay.
Okay. Hi everyone.
Yes. Already start? Yes. Okay.
Is it already start?
Yeah. Wait. Already. I think we still cannot hear the voice.
The voice.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any problem from there or something? Or maybe I should present my PowerPoint here.
Wait, we will try it once again. Okay. Volumenya, Mbak? I'm sorry. It's not yet connected with the volume, I guess. Oh, okay. Mas Panji, I think there's a technical problem with your pre-recorded. Would you like to present live?
Okay, okay.
Okay, is that okay?
Yeah, it's okay. I hope I can present it as good.
Yes.
Or you
And
you can share your video from your computer maybe, so we
Yes,
can still
okay.
see the recorded but from
Yes.
Mas Panji's computer, if you still have the file and everything.
Or you can share your pre-recorded presentation. It's okay, Mas Panji.
okay, just wait. Hello everyone. While I'm checking the video, I will. My name is Panji of Bunda Mulia University. I'm a outstanding lecturer for Bunda Mulia, but home base there, digital business. And then I also have side hustle at the Universitas Dian Nusantara, film and television, but for the business and marketing related subjects. Okay.
So I will start now.
Okay. So the video is
I have to introduce myself since this is a pre-recorded videos, but I will start this research, this introduction that currently I just published an article about journal about Telic and its virality last semester. And now I'm working on research about distribution and monetization of film-related contents, the film itself, and the articles about films. And then next year, hopefully, I can continue this with film distribution in Indonesia post-pandemic. I plan to do this in praxis and theory. So, Bismillah. So basically, I will start with background. The way to make sustainable business for media industry is still being discussed all over the world. How to fund the creators, the business or the body itself, especially with the rapid growth of the internet and its giant concurrent the market, Facebook and Google. So basically, what we get, what other players get. Actually, only small pieces of the pie, aside of the Google, aside from Google and Facebook. So we will discuss about the film-related contents. The case, advertising has been business model for media publishing organizations for years, and maybe you understood that the business model could be problematic. But things become more complex, become more complicated for when we talk about film articles and film reviews, because the advertisers usually came from the industry itself, the films, the distributors, the OTT, yeah. So it is it could be more problematic. Of course, I think the creators want their voice to be as clear as possible, and they only want they only want to serve their audience. They just want to give clear perspective subjectively from them about film, whether it's good or not. But of course, it is kind of impossible, if we can say it impossible, if the advertisers came from the film itself. So the subject of the interview is we had an interview with Adrian Jonathan Pasaribu of Cinema Poetica to introduce about them. Cinema Poetica is webzine established since 2010, based in Yogyakarta. At that time, students, bloggers, reviewers, programmer. So and they exist until now, and they have been fund themselves with a cooperative way. So but not really the cooperative, not really cooperative as registered legal, body legal, but the way they live until now, their members try to fund the webzine, for the operational, for the server, for the domain, and it's quite a work, yeah. So basically, beside of that, they have all over this 10 years and more, they got offers too from other entities, and they got the opportunity to fund the operational of Cinema Poetica. Like they get offer from film festivals to write about their festivals. They also get the opportunities. They got an offer to write for other media too, about film related content, for review, for essays, and so on. And then also working with governments. And later also, of course, with their community, with their followers, they still getting over to endorse films, placement to endorse films. And basically, of course, the challenge, writing for festivals, they need to endorse the films in other place. They cannot do that. They don't want to confuse their audience later. They don't want their audience to be someday, once the ads appear, the audience could be in question. Would always be in question about the purity of the content. And so in the process, they reject to continue with the festival. So also they got the offer to write for other media, but they are prohibited to write about sensitive issue, like left wing issue, maybe like criticism for the government, and other sensitive issue like that. And of course, working with government, the challenge is they don't really have the legal body until now. And later, of course, endorsing films, they don't want to do that at all. Okay, we continue it. So, came to the scene Kumparan Plus. Kumparan Plus is product extension by Kumparan.com. The model is paid subscription, and they publish their own documentary films. First, titled Selamanya Warga Kampung Bayam. It's a documentary film, consists of 2 episodes. So it's like it's series, yeah. People nowadays they don't want to say series as film. So, and also 2 content by Cinema Poetica about cinema Korea and the imagination of nationalism, and cinema about
Suaranya hilang. The voice is
gone.
they just need to submit the raw videos, and the tip, like for podcast or the second one, Cinema 1965, they have to submit videos, even though they don't need to edit it, yeah. They just need to submit the raw videos, and the people from the Kumparan will edit it for them to, according to their request, the flow and so on. So as we see now, as we see in this PowerPoint, we can see the sensitive issue can appear here, cinema related to 1965. We will discuss it later. So as I mentioned before, Kumparan gives the freedom to Cinemapotica to publish film articles based on their principle, based on their ideology, maybe based on their knowledge, of course, except for event report. For now, it's not yet there, and it's not on the plan. Only like the articles with essays, review, with kind of intellectualish art. And then the system, they also Kumparan paying Cinemapotica not based on viewers, but 5 months contract work. I can only say the range 75 to 10 million years for 5 articles that reach medias in 2 terms. After the first article and after all article published 50-50 the term. So next slide, the findings. According to Adrian, the fee is sufficient as they satisfied with the offer, and it enabled them to pay the operational cost of Cinemapotica next year. As I mentioned before, the server, the domain, so on, and it also allows Cinemapotica to learn more and create more in routine. Previously, it's not the case. Previously, if you follow them, it could be like 1 year they publish 5 to 6 contents. Yeah, but with this kind of contract, it pushes them to learn more and learn and publish beyond their current knowledge, and maybe learn more and then publish. So yeah, I think it's actually why we are finding this kind of business model. I think, isn't it? Like because we want to create more and we want to learn, and but we have to find a way to fund the process. So it's kind of solution. The model kind of solutive. Putting content in Kumparan Plus is interesting for Cinemapotica rather than putting it. Suppose there would be a new platform, because with this system of payment, because the Kumparan brand already established, even though it's a media startup, but the brand already there, followers already there, and the marketing team, the sosmed guy, the Google Ads maybe, and so on, is already managed by the Kumparan guy to ensure the number of readers. Of course, Cinemapotica don't want just to be paid and published. Of course, they also want their readership. They also want their ideas, their writings read by many people. Especially for film-related content, up until now, Kumparan didn't accept contents for any creator. So for now, it's only Kumparan that published the documentary films, and also they offer for film-related articles, for film studies. They do it in collaboration with Cinemapotica, as I mentioned before. So because actually I already asked it separately and in separate business about the possibility of having contents published on Kumparan, but until now it's not yet the case. It's not yet possible, because of course Kumparan need to make sure that the effort is worth it for them to publish very rich media. Film is very rich media, of course, and they need to make sure that the publisher, the content creator already have the followers, already have the name. Things I mentioned here, things I mentioning in here, still to be confirmed. But for now, what I can say is the content on Kumparan, we cannot just submit it. Suppose there will be content like documentary or film studies.
So sorry for I forgot that this is the last. So basically, Kumparan and Cinemapotica trust each other brand and each other branding. So Kumparan believe in Cinemapotica and their principle that they are aware that Cinemapotica is trustful for film content of their view and having clear view, and also Cinemapotica itself trust Kumparan to publish their articles. So so instead of just playing safe, just publishing the safe article, and so basically Kumparan trust their creators that they invite to Kumparan Plus to write many things, not only doing business as usual, but also permit their content creators to write, to publish many things like sensitive issues, leftist issues, maybe criticism, and that's not the case. And Kumparan, I think already find that this kind of idealism, that this kind of thoughts, knowledge about the sensitive issue maybe can be solved. It is what can be find in the Kumparan Plus and could be interesting for many their readers, so that they don't need to be afraid about it and just go on with the paid subscription. Thank you. Research still in progress. Suppose there are any question, I'm here, and this is my email. Thank you, Samka. My name is Panji.
Okay. Thank you, Mas Panji. Interesting also. Okay. Now I think everyone already have a question in mind, and then now we start our Q&A session. If participants have questions, I guess you can raise your hand, and then we discuss together. And anyone, or actually,
I think we have one from Puan Hani in the chat,
yes.
and then if no one else already asked before, then I can happily to address that one first, because in my chat box it's come first, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, Mas Zaki, perhaps you can respond first for the questions from Dr. Hani.
Okay, so is it before that, is it confirmed that the fourth presenter it's not here yet, so we don't need to wait again? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I've seen that in the chat from Puan Hani. Thank you for your question. Hello. And in terms of the tote bag, I think the simple answer is both of them. But my position to use that as part of my argument building, it's not looking at the making of the tote bag, but using it symbolically as the material object, as part of the material culture. So I'm interested more in the way they use it rather than what exactly the tote bags is or are. So I found out actually in my own observation and my own field notes is basically some of them actually create their own specific tote bag, and it's based on the workshop events that they organized before, or maybe they created collaboration with outside of their own group. They usually use and make that. But my point in this particular talk is actually on the way they use that as a symbolic aspect. The one that Orvan Lofgren, one of the ethnologists, used the term the sensitive object. So, and I don't think either way, whether they make it by themselves or whether they use a very random, and when you mention it's a normal, it reminds me of one of my own field note. It's not just normal, so-called normal. Sometimes it's really random. It's really random. And for me, in the beginning, I thought there is a pattern, and as a researcher, I tried to find a pattern, but sometimes one it's coming from their own colleague, and one is from their own event, and other it's really like maybe they get it from a shop. It's really random, but the same pattern, it's no one use plastic. So that's my point. So the way they use the fabric one, and it create a sense of, once of course they want to embrace with the current states of the universal use of an environmentally concern and so on. But to me, beyond developmentalism view, or beyond this environmental concern, to me it's more about this creative lingo. So yeah, I think hopefully it also address your question, Hani. And
Yeah, because in Malaysia nowadays, especially that kind of culture, everyone is bringing their own tote bags. Especially, we have this campaign, right? You have to bring your own bag to buy stuff and things, right? So that's actually answer my question, because I thought that because they want to feel belong to any community, that they bought this particular tote bag from this particular community, but they just use any tote bag. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for answering
my pleasure. And also just to give a little bit context, Rennie and Hani, that my fieldwork work conducted in between 2016 2017, and in both cities, as far as I remember, this kind of campaign of bringing on your bag for shop, and also the price of a plastic bag, it's also kind of like during that kind of emerging, that particular period. Yeah.
Thank you again, Dr. Zaki.
Sama-sama.
Thank you, Bu Hani, for the questions. And then since I hear the presentations, I think we have an anchor for all the presenters today is a creative work, right? Films, and then creative collection, and then film distribution. Actually, if participant, there's no any question, I will start with questions for the presenter, actually, because I'm interested with when Mas Zaki said that the last presentation, she said that the informant said it's okay to be slow, right? But it's like a contra with what we do now. It's a very quickly, everything's going faster and faster and faster. And then I think so I'm curious with how they the creative collections embrace with the digital platform, or what else? So how they face in time of monetizations, like Mas Panji said, with the Kumparan case, right? It's in terms of monetization issue, and then digital platform everywhere, and then the speed, it's very fast, and then how they maintain like the idealist work, right? With their activity, with their creative collective, Mas Zaki. And then later, I also want to raise questions to Mbak Saskia, because it's interesting way when the life story becoming a new to start open the relations of Indonesian and Malaysia in the history, right? So how you can actually the documentary is a part, as you mentioned, that a practice as a research, but and then this is where is how you manage the personal experience with the family, and then knowing the new, I think it can be a new knowledge, right, for the family about the history of your grandparents. So how embrace the the experience, the feeling, and then the memory when. Oh, okay, my family connected with the lefties. As we know, in Indonesia, it's very something that we have to avoid to talk or to discuss, right? So how is the experience? But okay, I think I will stop there, and then after that I will ask the participant if there's something to question. Yeah. Please, Mas Zaki and Mbak Saskia, and perhaps Mas Panji also comment in the time of the monetizations of films and the challenging and then the opportunity also. Okay, Mas.
Yeah, maybe Anggi wants to go
Will
first.
first.
Mbak Saskia, okay.
Please.
Oh, sorry, I think I have another audios. Sorry, I think because of the Mas Zaki and Mas Panji questions is related, so I will take this opportunity first because it's more mine is more likely, because it's a personal history, a personal story. That the experience is it's interesting because in the sessions before, I invited my mother and my uncle to be joined in the screening, and also the audiences from the another panel discussions, and also relatives, colleagues to see the film and gather about that. First thing first, I think it's the feeling is kind of like this. It's beginning from the very personal story that I really didn't know what is it related to the context of the history in the both country, because as I mentioned before, we nowadays living in the love-hate relationship with Indonesians, Malaysians, and maybe the discourse, the contemporary discourse about the relationship within Indonesians, Malaysia is about how the immigrants, like I earlier mentioned in my presentations. But then after we, this is kind of the revisiting again the history of the both country. And I think it's interesting because my personal story or my personal interest within the whole of the film can relate it into the bigger context that I actually surprised because that's not the aim before. This is just about how I reimagining my grandparents that's already died, and that's the thing. But then when I'm digging up and then I interviewing my family members, I'm doing the domestic ethnography like I mentioned before. So I know the family's feelings about him. I also know that he's in family. He's just like a funny man. They already said, they always said like that. But his experience actually still blurred. And what it come up, what I can explore is the experiences that might be interesting within both country. In this my presentations, I just mentioned about the both country, but also not only that, but also this is like explores the political identity of him. Because after he moved to Indonesians, because he's deported from Malaysians at that time, because it's labeled as a communist party that against British colonial, then he moved to Indonesia, and he actually continuing the protests, but in the silence. So it's kind of the how to say the timeline of the political identity life representing by one person. And I think yeah, I think this is also awakening for us, awakening for us, the family member, that we just know about this after I digging up, and yeah, like, because since this is a practice as research, so during the practice, I just know the findings and I can how to say make the relations of that, and it's still until now, I said before, it's still question mark, because yeah, the relations of Indonesia and Malaysia itself is still, yeah, you know, a long history, but then along ups and down conditions, but then also how to say, the Indonesian, for the in the terms as an Indonesian itself, it's it makes people's how to say, to see the different perspective. I think I hope I answered your questions, and I'm looking forward for another discussion of this film, because as I said before, this is kind of the still, how to say, research, yeah, research that's still going on. Yeah, thank you, Reni.
Thank you, Mbak Saskia.
And I want to listen more about when you mentioned about silent protest. It's really
Yes, yes.
connect to my own. I use the term subtle resistance in my research, and you use the term, Anggi, silent protest. I'm looking forward to watch the movie and then see how you work and navigate in this term conceptually, because maybe it's also have a connection with what I have done, and I'm still doing that, and then I'm still trying to explore that. Really interested. Will the documentary be screened publicly in the near future, Anggi?
Yeah, this movie actually, matiin semuanya yang di sini di laptop. Sorry, because of the.
Yeah. While waiting, yeah.
I'm sorry. The movie still continue to the, we are now is preparing the feature length version, but then because of the COVID, we cannot travel around to the Malaysia, and all the archive is actually found there. Here, nothing I can found. So yeah, the project is still going on into the feature length project. And yes, you true that there is the silence, that actually I cannot found everything about him after the independence, even though he wrote about the New Order, both of New Order and Sukarno era, but then there is nothing found there. So yeah, this is, I'm still digging, and I think it's not a short term research about that. And looking forward, actually this kind of sessions is to looking forward how people can react with this kind of thinking, and also the contribution to the archive.
Perhaps we can continue the question to Mbak Saskia, because I guess in the chat box there is Mbak Lucia Ratna asking about can you make a profile document of your grandfather with your data belong now, to answer who is he, what his role in Indonesia or Malaysia. And then, do you feel that Indonesia and Malaysia are like South and North Korea, separated with different ideology, although they are serumpun, as you explained before?
Yeah. Okay. It's can you make a profile documentary? The thing that I'm not making the profile documentary is because I see this filmmaking process as a research. So and then me myself as a first person filmmaker is have to be on the film, because it made the films how to say that makes the films because of me myself, that I'm considered to looking for my kind of like who I am, like what's the relations me with my grandparents, because they already died before I was born, and how I can consider myself, my identity, because at 2016 my mom said like, okay, we're going to Idul Fitri in Malaysia. What, Malaysia? What's our relations into Malaysia? I just know myself as a girl who was born in Jakarta, then moved to Jogja, and then studying, and I didn't know when people asking me who you are. I always said that I'm Indonesians. I'm not non-Japanese, non-Madura, because my father's coming from Madura. So it's how to say, it have to be or me myself that revisiting the identity of mine. That's why I can explore more about him, because the film itself is actually coming from my my perspective. And even though until the end of the film, when you can see the film, it's actually about the reflections of myself when I see myself as a citizen, yeah, like belongs to the nations, and also when I see my grandparents see about his political background. So it's kind of the intercorrelated. So it have to be like me and him, because I cannot really explore about him if you telling like documentary profile. So I have to have a lot of the data. So I have to fill the gap. And now I still a lot of the gap, and I wonder how to fill in the gap into this practice filmmaking process, I think. And that Indonesian and Malay, because I'm not focusing my research in the South and North Korea, so I don't really know about it, but I remember, maybe I can share a little bit about the experience, because I remember when I invited to DMZ Documentary Film Festival. It's a demilitarized zone film festival in Goyang. It's in the area near the North Korea, and that's a festival actually is to make the two countries stick together. Not the stick together in terms of the country, but in terms of they are family. So I don't see Indonesians in Malaysia in that way, because we are not in the difference actually political, let's say political belief. We both a democratic country, right? I mean, and we both shares common in the political actually. So I don't see that the sameness between Korea, North and South Korea, and Indonesians and Malaysia. But here in Indonesia, Malaysia is unique because they actually before is the ideas before is the greater Indonesia, Indonesia Raya, that adopted from Sriwijaya country, and Indonesia right now is actually not only Malays but also the peoples in the east, included Indonesia. So I think we have to make it a difference between the state and the nation, yeah, in this context. So I tend to be more focused on the nations, to revisiting the identity itself, but not in terms of the Indonesians and Malaysian as a countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbak Saskia.
May I jump into this conversation,
Yes,
Reni? Because I had a very tiny listening to Anggi experience of using this approach of practice-led research, or in this case, filmmaking as a research. I think responding to the previous question, it reminds me of a tiny example, quite similar with your experience, Anggi. A couple years ago, we at the department in Jogja, we had it's a routine visiting fellow program from Malaysia at the time. And one of the pensyarah or the docent or the lecturer who came to us after a few weeks of an interaction, we just realized that she chose our place because she wanted to connect to her somehow extended relative in Magelang. And then we were surprised that, oh, really? And then for us, who assume that we create this international exchange program, Indonesia, Malaysia, so we like sharing a completely different story and then combine, and then suddenly after 2-3 weeks, we kind of like share, I use your word, Anggi, your concept, minor history. And we share our own experience. And then this pensara or docent from Malaysia, and then she eventually asked us how to get to this village in Magelang. She wanted to connect because that's part of her personal willing to be in Jogja. And then for us, we try to also reflect that story, that maybe at some point in our trade of family trees, we also come from, as plenty of studies already done in Southeast Asian studies, including, for example, Ariel Herianto, who studied that the term Indonesia itself and the nation of Indonesia, it cannot be understood in a singular, it's always in a plural. So I think the very important thing from this discussion, and also from you, we need more work like what Anggi already did. We need more minor histories in a plural term to understand our region. I think it could be the starting point could be a minor history from very personal reflection like Anggi did, and maybe after that maybe a collective reflection. But I think it's more important of this people to, I would call it people to people digging stories, rather than or we all understand, even as a scholars here, we are raised within the ideology of this the colonial history, and then afterward the dictatorship history, and then we forget our own people to people minor histories in plural. And rather than using history in a big H in the capital, the history, I think I would rather prefer like this kind of minor histories with a small H but in plural. And I think more work we need that in any form. Today we listen on the filmmaking, and maybe in a photograph project essay, or maybe in an archival work, or maybe it's a kind of like an established research approach in a very academic way, and then we collect that and we combine that. I think that's the most important thing. And I remember I still have a question, right? From Rennie. Is that okay? Or is there any other question we have from the participant?
Okay, I guess Mas Panji also asked to Mas Zaki actually. Okay, but I guess the time I just remind the time, I think is 10 perhaps 10 minutes left. So perhaps I will ask Mas Zaki to respond the questions, and then Mas Panji will be, perhaps you have a closing statement or something to respond our discussion, right, about the monetization.
All right.
Okay.
I have two questions. I will start from your question first, Rennie. When you ask about the relations between slowness and the use of digital media, I can start with this. All the collective that I studied, including their members and not only the key person and members, they embrace digital media fully. And that's also part of my, maybe I didn't go into that further in this limited paper, but in my book, even there's a chapter specifically, chapter 8 is about the way they use the social media. But that's the one that is actually interested. That's why I use this quote, it's okay to be slow. And then even I have another example as well from other quote and other empirical material, that the way they actually balancing between criticizing or what I call subtle resistance toward or against the backdrop of global creative discourse, creative city discourse, creative industries discourse, and also creative industry practice. And also the context of it when I studied it in 2016, 2017, the fieldwork, and then it's the writing itself and the follow-up years afterward. Like Bandung itself just proclaim their new recognition as UNESCO creative city, especially in the section of city of design. And then nationally, we also have at the time Bekraf as an institution who actually part of the embrace on institutionalizing the idea of creativity. But of course, they have their own meaning. They have their own practice. And then in Malaysia, they have DIKN, like kind of like a regulate the federal government standard on creative industries. I think a slightly part already being explained yesterday by Thomas in his session. So to me, when they actually against it, but they actually embrace that, that's the one that interesting. And then I'm coming back to the one of the theoretical position like the Michel de Certeau, the poetics of everyday life, the everyday tactics. So this slowness is actually not as a kind of against fully to the, let's say, if we choose the other topic, let's say beyond creativity, let's say when we remember maybe a decade ago when we discussed about globalization and anti-globalization, free trade market, anti-free trade market. At the time, this dichotomy is really clear, right? Clear cut. If you belong to that camp, you belong to that camp. If you belong to the other camp, you belong that, and then you become alternative. But in my study, and as well as maybe in other studies as well, during these more contemporary times, these clear cut are no longer there. It's more blurry, like my background now. it's in between. So the idea of they don't want to go into that creative industries discourse or practice, but they still want to keep this. I think it's also related to Anggi's comment previously about identity. This is their identity. And even in my books, I use that kind of quote as part of the blurb here. I can read it for you. Is actually part of this. This one is not from the same quote of "It's okay to be slow," but resonate the same thing. I quote: "We never want to join any kind of competition that uses a label such as social entrepreneur. That label and the competition have changed the way through sense of commonality, because they change commonality to become community. Our community, it's not community." End of quote. I even use that as a part of the blurb of my book to show that they actually part of this so-called creativity, creative discourse, or I use the term here, the creative city bandwagon. How it's become in Indonesian word, I'm not sure whether it's similar in Malay, but in Indonesian it's like latah kind of thing. And everything just have to follow that. Even we as an scholars in academic, in university, we have to be creative and it's become like the latah word or the bandwagon. Is that similar word in Malay, Puan Hani, or is there any exact word that can explain that?
That too, as melatah, as an
melatah kan? Yeah. Melatah, yeah. In my book, I since it is written in English, I use the word the creative city bandwagon. So all the things have to follow that. So these particular groups, based on my studies, the way I saw it is actually the slowness is actually not simply against everything else, but it's more about their everyday tactic. It's also connect to Panji's question. How did I see the tense among this? Yes, this is also being asked by few of my in any forum like a previous conference or even during my own seminar. It's also part of this in between. The tense or the tensions is not just between the collective face-to-face the government, the collective face-to-face the local municipalities, something like that. Sometimes it's also about the collective or this collective, 4 of them in Bandung, 4 of them in Georgetown, face-to-face or before other collective in their own cities. Is actually a complex dance. I had a very I feel lucky when I had a chance in my second fieldwork follow them until Ubud, Bali. So long story short, few of the collective in Bandung had an event in Bali in Ubud, and then I want to join that because I want to understand how this group that I study is being perceived by other collective. When I was in Ubud, it looks like an harmony and everything. But during the evening, during the dinner and everything, then the whole story come up. It's actually some of them actually work. Okay, we can use that. We cannot use that. So the tense usually come from, coming back to my own theoretical position, it's coming back from the poetics of everyday life, the way they do their own urban creativity. It's not in the tense that is similar when they against the government point of view or against the global discourse of creativity. It's more about practical matters. It's about the way they do things differently, but also the way they receive a funding. Because for some groups, they are okay to receive a funding from major cultural agencies. Like, I cannot mention here, maybe every one of you knows that many cultural agencies provide a funding for creative work, creativity, but all the collective that I study, they intentionally say no to such a process, because for them, this kind of receiving funding from external agencies beyond their own network create a new tension on their own independence and the alternative way. So when it's to compare, I don't want to go into that camp because I don't do the comparative study per se. So the way I do between Indonesian and Malaysian case is actually to reinforce one to another. Of course, there are different background, different context, and they don't know each other before I did my study, because I actually the one who introduced them at some point. And how did I see it? I think they work with their own network. One of the key word here is social network. This is not the media digital network, but the social network. Of course, within that they use social media, they use digital environment, but they really hold on it. For example, after I finished the research, published the book in the last 1.5 years during the pandemic, I keep following the story of them, of course, from a distance, using a media. There are plenty of changing and situation, environment, adaptation, adjustment. Well, to give you a hint, this is also part of my new idea on creating a new project on so-called creative resilience beyond these groups. But then I just realized that what they really hold on, whether in Malaysia or Indonesia, is the social network that they have been building way before even my study. So if you ask about similarity, is it about similarity or is it about centralized and everything? Yeah, I think the simple way to make it simple, they don't really care is whether there is a changing of regulation, there is a changing of creative direction or anything. They keep doing that within their own collective and within their own social network. When the social network getting bigger and bigger, they of course they face a new tension, and they tend to have not into that bigger ideas. They have the sense of let's stop here, let's stop here. That's kind of sense. And that's one, it's interesting. And I think it happened also in other cities. I found out in Jogja, I found out in Malang, and recently also in Jember. And I'm trying to see it, expanding it, and also in other part of Penang, because it's beyond Georgetown as well. And what I didn't see, it's in Kuala Lumpur, because I think it's like any other capital city. They have a different infrastructure, social tensions, and it's somehow different. And I'm personally prefer to study the so-called second series and even third series to find out more minor stories like what Anggi did with her own project. I hope this also address your question, Panji. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Perhaps the last closing statement from Mas Panji to.
Okay. Thank you. I don't know
Yes.
if it's yeah. So I arranged it in scatterly. Maybe I need to say sorry for my modest PPT PPT file. So basically, we believe that this pandemic, COVID, kind of correcting what happened in the world, including the cinema scene. So we could start reimagine the possibilities. Previously, the system is the films need to be always screened in the cinemas, and the film that screened in the cinemas cannot be previously screened everywhere first. But I think it started changing. It started to shift. So and then interesting point is that we also start to see the initiative from the activists and
Did Panji is gone?
No, wait. Still here, I think. Mas Panji.
I think we're losing.
I
I thought it's mine. I thought it's my connection.
Okay.
It's weird in this online environment when someone
Yes.
like freeze. It's always like come up. Oh, this is my connection. This is my.
Okay. Perhaps Mas Panji while waiting Mas Panji, but I guess the time is. Oh, okay. Mas Panji is not here. Okay. Because of the time limit, so I don't know how, but I think I have to ask to the committee. Is that okay? We will wait Mas Panji for a while, or we just proceed the next agenda for photo session to close the sessions. Mbak Miranda, any guidance? Yes, it's okay. 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 Now, before we close the sessions, I guess I don't want to conclude this panel because I guess the discussion is very fruitful and still to be continued. I guess because so many things that we can do with this topic. So okay, we will have photo sessions. Mas Panji already here. Okay,
yeah,
Mas Panji, you still want to say something for the close statement? I guess I still have. We can give you a 5 minutes.
yeah.
Okay. Continue.
Thank you. Sorry for the. So for now, we still depend. Sadly, we still need to admit that we still dependent on the big money, like what happened in the Hollywood after the depression, big depression, textile industry from other industry help them. So basically, it's still the case for now. We still depend that. We still need that big money to maybe believe in the cinemas and so on. So we saw that Bioskop Online, the Kumparan Plus I mentioned before, and I have a friend that built a new short film platforms for us to see. So maybe so this kind of things that to be explored later, and maybe after this pandemic, we will find a station how people can fund themselves, and yeah, hopefully things getting better.
Okay, thank you, Mas Panji, for your statement. Okay, once again, thank you for all of the presenters today, and then we will close our panel with photo sessions. So please open your cam, and we will do the photo. Mbak Miranda, okay, already. Can you give 1, 2, 3, something like that, Mbak Miranda, so we can post? Okay, I will give.
I'm still not get used with this tradition. It's a unique of Southeast Asia or even Indonesia and neighbor countries. Yeah, it's fine.
It's okay. Okay.
Taking pictures of the event.
Perhaps I will. How many? 1, 2, 3. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Okay. I guess. Okay. Thank you. Once
Because
again.
now I realize even a screenshot can replace a report, right? That's a unique thing now with the pandemic.
It's a multi-layered burden.
Yeah.
Multi-layer burdens, administration's purposes. Okay. Okay, thank you for coming, for the participant and then the presenter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next conference perhaps. Okay, and stay safe for everyone. Thank you for all.
Thank you also.
Thank you.
Thank
for
you,
the
Reni,
opportunity.
for
Bye-bye.
moderating this
Thank you, Mas
session.
Panji.
Anggi,
Thank you, Mas Daki.
Panji. Hopefully we'll see you soon.
Yeah.
And all the participants that stay here since the beginning.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.